This is Football at 4.
Man, you want to talk about pushing your chips all the way in? Haason Reddick is one of the best pass rushers that we have in our league. Talking about 4 straight years of double-digit sacks. I mean, he's one of the best pass rushers in the game of football. So as much as Jet fans were like just crying about losing Bryce Huff, and Bryce Huff is a really good player, Haason Reddick is on a totally different level.
Damian Woody said that this morning here on 97.3 ESPN. Reddick is a Jet. How did it all happen? And, of course, why did it happen? And what does Geoff Mosher think about the compensation the Eagles got back in return? It's Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can get on all podcasting platforms except for Google Podcasts, which is going away, which is sad for me because that's the one that I use. You could also go to their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Well, you just heard what Damian Woody said. They're going all in with Reddick. So why are the Eagles out of the Reddick business here, Geoff Mosher?
The Eagles are out of the Haason Reddick business, Mike, and we've talked about this coming for a while now. We all knew Haason Reddick wanted a new deal, wanted more money. Eagles did not want to do that. The Eagles, and here's where I think it really turned. Obviously, they gave him permission to seek a trade. They were looking to see what the market was going to be. But when the Eagles decided to go get Bryce Huff in free agency, who plays the same position as Haason Reddick and who profiles as an up-and-coming pass rusher the way Reddick was when they got Reddick, and then when they decided to bring back Josh Sweat on money that was guaranteed, like that to me signaled the official, yes, they are going to go ahead and trade Haason Reddick radar out there, because you're not going to, I think we talked about this last time when we were just discussing the overall picture. What are you going to do? You're going to have, even at the money you were paying Haason Reddick for this year, which was still a bargain, that was a lot of money for somebody who was going to be a situational pass rusher, because you committed starter money to Bryce Huff, you had starter money to Josh Sweat coming back on a redone deal, and you have Nolan Smith, who the Eagles said they wanted to see more of as a first-round pick in year 2. So no matter what, no matter how you sliced it, Haason Reddick and others were going to be playing less snaps, and that didn't make sense for the money that he was asking for, which would have been already more than the money that they were already paying him, which also didn't make sense, and that cleared the way for Howie Roseman to make what's viewed as a very unpopular trade, and I get it. And I think people are correct to say, how are you a better team now when you essentially just traded pass rushers with the Jets, except the one you're giving away is 4 straight years of sacks and one of the most elite pass rushers that you've had in your franchise history. I get that. The only response I would say is, when you talk about are the Eagles still all in, or are they serious about being Super Bowl contenders, is let's see what the overall defense, let's see what the overall 53 looks like a week before the season's about to start. Because for Howie Roseman, the offseason and the team assembly has always been about the entirety of the offseason, including OTAs, training camp, May, June. Some of his best moves have come well deep into what we call the offseason period.
Mm-hmm. Let me get your thoughts. You mentioned the trade. And many people look at Howie, and it's Howie's season, and he wins these trades all the time. You said it's unpopular. But what do you make of them getting a 2026 third that can be a second? Not even a 2025. This is 2 years down the line. And there's some contingents on it, 67.5% play time, and has 10 or more sacks. It's not and or, it's both. So what do you make of the compensation that they got in return here? What kind of story does that tell?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there when the deal was consummated, Mike, so I'm going to use some good educated rationale. I don't think Howie Roseman wanted to trade Haason Reddick for the lowest offer. I think he wanted to get the best offer that he could. So by him getting a 2022 pick, that's very likely, in my opinion, based on the criteria, to be a second-round pick, as long as Haason Reddick either plays, the 67.5% of the stats, or he gets 10 sacks, something like that. It's looking like it's going to be a second-round pick. It just signals to me that teams were not giving Howie Roseman a first, a second, maybe even not a third in this year's draft or next year's draft. The market to get more for Haason Reddick wasn't there. So in order to get the best deal he could get from a value standpoint, Howie had to accept a highly future pick in 2026, which, say what you want, that's still, if it's a second-round pick, it's still a second-round pick, and it's still ammunition, and it's still something he can use, whether it's this year or next year in a trade, if he wants to get a really good player, or if it just winds up being a pick that he uses, that second-round pick could be a pretty good pick. Let's be real. The Jets look good on paper, but they're commonly a team who doesn't finish as well as they might want to or look, and that second-round pick could be a pretty good second-round pick if things continue to not go well for the Jets.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people said, how come they didn't get something in this draft or even next year's draft? You're going 2 years down the line for Reddick. Now, obviously, the question would be, as you kind of hinted at, like, he wanted a new deal. The Eagles didn't want to give a new deal. But some people have said, well, what would he have done? Would he have held out? Do you think he would have not played had the Eagles held on to him?
No, and early in this ordeal, which is basically when we come back from, I guess, the Senior Bowl is when Adam Kaplan first started hearing and reporting that things might not end well here for Haason Reddick as far as, the roster, the dispute and everything. I felt like the Eagles didn't need to do anything. I felt like we saw the situation play out with Chris Jones last offseason. We wanted more money from the Chiefs. Chiefs didn't do anything, and Chris Jones threatened to hold out, and he held out for as long as you possibly can hold out before it gets dicey. And that's if you don't report to a team by a certain date in September, then you're not going to accrue your year, right? I mean, there's no leverage a player has anymore for holding out, especially if you're not going to get that accrued year in that last year of your contract and make that money. You have to basically say, I'm willing to go the whole year without getting paid, the whole Le'Veon Bell route, which didn't really work out great for Le'Veon. And Chris Jones wasn't willing to do it, so he finally reported, wound up losing a little bit of money for last year because of his holdout, because teams can't absorb the fine money anymore when you report. Obviously, he made that up in this last deal that he got because he had a great year and they won the Super Bowl. But I always felt that early in the process, the Eagles could take the same route. They could just say, hey, fine, you don't show up until September. You know this defense. You're a veteran. We don't need you till September anyway. And then dare Haason Reddick to then sit out for the season, which I doubt he would have done. But, Mike, like I said, things changed once they acquired Bryce Huff, once they redid Sweat's deal and guaranteed his money for this year and made Haason Reddick essentially a third of three here. And that, to me, signaled that they were going to trade him regardless. I think that's where the point of daring him to hold that stuff went out the door because Howie lost a little bit of leverage in doing what he did with the other two guys anyway. And at that point, it was, what's the best offer can we get for him?
Right, and then, of course, you mentioned it. They signed Huff. I mean, is this an indication? I mean, they're not saying that they think Huff is better, but they're saying we think he's younger, and it's worth paying the money to him at the younger. This goes back to they don't want to give the money to a guy who they think is potentially has his best years behind him.
Yeah, very possibly so. They signed a guy like Huff, who I think, even though they play different positions, you can sort of look at it similarly as the Javon Hargrave 3-year deal from 4 years ago, in that Hargrave was a nice player with the Steelers. He was a rotational tackle. He wasn't a starter, but he had shown them something on tape that they felt if you bring him in here, your culture, your system, your coaches and all that, then you can get something. And they certainly got a great, I got a Pro Bowl player out of Javon Hargrave. So you see Bryce Huff, saw what he did last year. Yes, you can say it was situational. They obviously believe that he can come in here, play more snaps. Now, it'll still always be a rotation. So in some regards, it's situational, but he is going to be a starter for the money he's being made. And, the Eagles believe that he'll be as impactful as he was with the Jets, if not more, in that role.
So they got Bryce Huff, Josh Sweat, Nolan Smith. Do you think now that the defense in that spot is better than what they had a year ago?
No, I don't. Although, are we talking about the first 10 games of the year or the last 7? Because last year was a tale of two different almost defenses. And, there was the Sean Desai defense, the Matt Patricia defense. But I've always been in the camp. I don't think Haason Reddick was one of those guys who looked to me like he had lost a lot or didn't have as much gas in the tank. There were other guys you could certainly say that about. I know the stats say he didn't have that many pressures, didn't have that many sacks. I'd be shocked if he went over to the Jets and looked or produced in the way that he produced for the last 5-6 weeks for the Eagles. I think he'll be just fine there. So, yeah, I don't look at the Eagles right now and say that they are better overall. I think they have far more question marks than they did. Doesn't mean some of those question marks won't be answered. Doesn't mean Huff can't be good. Doesn't mean Sweat can't bounce back. Doesn't mean Nolan Smith won't play like a first-rounder. It's just that all that stuff is if instead of proven. But I'll wait real quick. I'll say this again. I look at it as the entirety of the defense right now does not look good at all. Still have Bradbury as a corner. You're still not sure what's going on at safety after Gardner Johnson, but I'm sure Howie sees the same thing that you and I are seeing, and that's why I say you got to wait this one out and see what it looks like going into the year.
Give me your thoughts then on Nolan Smith's role and what that means for him.
Yeah, I mean, they felt when they drafted him that he was someone who tested and profiled similarly to Haason Reddick. There are some metrics that say he profiles similar to Micah Parsons. I don't believe you're going to get Micah Parsons out of Nolan Smith. But he can still be a really good edge rusher with a lot of juice. He has to get stronger, Mike. That was a big thing coming out of Georgia. Another limited reps guy there, a guy who played edge but also dropped back a little bit. So, I mean, he probably can fit that Vic Fangio system well, but he's just got to get bigger, stronger, and he's got to stay healthy. The shoulder, he has talked about himself, has always been problematic for him. I believe there's a report that he had a procedure done, so hopefully that makes it better. But he needs to get stronger, and then he just needs to get out there with more reps in a position that's conducive for him to succeed, which I believe is edge rusher. I don't think he's really an off-ball linebacker, even though some people felt he had the skills to play it, and they tried to do that with him last year when they got thin there. I think you got to put him at the edges, let him do his thing, coach him up, hope he stays healthy, and see what you get out of him this year.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting one, right? I mean, obviously a first-round pick, and you would hope they have some hope that he can take another step and be a big part because you just lost Reddick, and you don't know what Huff might bring, but you're hoping for a lot for both of those two, I guess, because you just gave away. Is that fair? You gave away for now anyway, because the reason why I say that is it's a different thing if you had a team like this team is not a finished product. You got a piece for 2 years down the road. I think that's what's the frustrating point.
I can see that. I definitely think it's a criticizable move if things don't work out. But when you make a move, you have to have a counter move. Last year, I thought Howie Roseman had bad counter moves. We've talked about this a lot on Inside the Birds. Lost a lot of guys, decided to pay or not pay some guys that he probably could have, DJ Edwards being one of them. And I always say, that's fine and dandy. You can do that as a GM, especially if you're considered pretty good at your job like Howie is, as long as you've got a response, as long as you have answers. If you're going to say we're still in it to win it, then you need to replace your losses with guys who can step in and do well. Well, he didn't really draft very well in 2020 and 2021 so far, it looks. And many of the free agents he brought in last year did not do a good job. And even from the start, like Terrell Edmonds, does he really fit what the Eagles want to do? No. What are you doing there? So nothing looked right from the start, and it wasn't right. So Howie's got to take the bullet for that. But that's why you look at this offseason and say, yeah, that's a criticizable move. It's frustrating that it's a into the future pick. But let's just see how it all plays. Let's see what the product is when they go into the season, because there's still a lot of time. And I still believe there are some big moves left for Howie Roseman. And I also wouldn't dismiss the idea of the Eagles now looking at edge rusher in the draft pretty early.
That's what I was going to follow up with. How much now at 22 does edge rusher become even a stronger possibility? Very strong. And depends on who they want, if they have a certain quote-unquote guy in mind. I mean, I know Laitu Latu from UCLA is visiting them on a 30 visit. I think Chop Robinson on 30. Some of these guys, they got to get answers about, whether it's production or medicals. But
22 is assuming Howie Roseman stays at 22. It's been pretty infrequent that he picks at his slotted position in the first round recently. So obviously has a lot of ammunition, including that pick that he just acquired, to either make a trade in the draft or make a time trade like he did with A.J. Brown.
Geoff Mosher, Reddick traded on Friday. By the way, Adam broke the news on the air. It was so loud where we were, I didn't even hear him tell me that. That was during the Phillies game when that happened. But now that we got it all under our belts here, we got a little bit better information. Good stuff by you. You can check out the Inside the Birds podcast for even more reaction to this trade. Reddick to the Jets, they announced it today. It's a 2026 third. That would become a second if Reddick hits certain play time threshold. So we'll see and keep our eye on that. All right, Geoff, appreciate it, man.
You got it, Mike. Have a good one.